Hi, it's good to meet you and to be able to sit down and talk to you. My name is Kimberly Gutierrez, and I'm a student here at Regis University. I'm a visual arts major. And Tony Ortega actually took me and a couple of my classmates to your gallery talk a couple weeks ago, and none of us got to ask you a whole lot of questions during that time. So I thought I'd take a chance to kind of elaborate on some of your artwork and get some more insight on you as a person. And I'd like to start by asking you, what was the first person, place, or object that you ever photographed and how it made you feel?
The first object and place, I was a falconer when I was in undergraduate school. So the first picture that I remember being awestruck by was the picture of my falcon hunting. I was just kind of like, oh my word, this is so cool. And was also a huge, and still I'm a pretty big backpacker. So I spent a lot of time in Glacier, in the Bob Marshall Wilderness area, and Beartooth in Montana. And I always took my camera with me. And I never really thought a lot about it. It was mostly just kind of a document for me to know where I was and where I had been and to kind of recall the good times. I didn't really think about it seriously as an art form, mostly more of a document.
Kind of going off of that, what was your first inspiration, and do you have any more contemporary inspirations?
I do. In the gallery talk I mentioned, I think 4 or 5 people. Cartier-Bresson, who, as somebody who photographs on the street, is a pretty huge influence. Robert Frank, who just passed away this past year in New York, is a huge influence. Gary Winogrand, another American street photographer. Josef Koudelka, who I got to see in Paris this year at Paris Photo, which was memorable. I mean, I don't even know how to describe how incredible it was to finally meet him in person, you know, somebody who's one of your heroes. And Ralph Eugene Meatyard, who was an optometrist in Kentucky, who I wrote my MFA thesis on. They were really pretty big influences on my work. Then as far as contemporary people, Hiroshi Sugimoto, who's a Japanese photographer, currently living in the United States. People who are not photographers, and I'm assuming that question you're going to ask me momentarily. Anselm Kiefer, who's a German painter. Gerhard Richter, who's also a German painter. And 2 scientists, Watson and Crick, because my undergraduate degree was in science. They were a pretty big influence on me as far as just focus and the ability to think outside the box, and those kinds of things were pretty influential. And again, obviously my parents who supported me through everything. So.
And going into your work a little bit more, since everything you have on display in the gallery lacks color, is there any particular reason? Is that for personal style, or do you feel that color might take away from the feeling that you're trying to evoke?
I think it's a combination of things. I think, first of all, personal style is a big thing. I see in black and white, for the most part, when I go out to photograph. Black and white photographs, for me, stability-wise, as far as the archival stability, they're very, very stable. And I think that's an important piece for me because it's an archive. I also think that when you begin to deal with color, it adds a whole nother layer of pieces that you have to decipher. Not only is it the image, but then you're dealing with color and analogous colors or complementary colors or push and pull and what colors mean psychologically and those kinds of things. So for me, I feel that by not using color, what happens is people can concentrate more on the image and what I'm trying to say with the images.
Your current work, how does it make you feel? And what do you expect people to feel when they view it?
What does it make me feel? Oftentimes, especially with the street photographs, I've been using the same gear for maybe 30 years. So as I look around the room and I look at the photographs that are on the wall, the bulk of the photographs I don't even look through the viewfinder. I understand my gear, I know how it sees, and I'm sure you're aware that, you know, the moment you point a camera at somebody, they're like, which is not what I'm after. Not looking oftentimes helps a lot. I use a rangefinder camera, so it's very quiet. So oftentimes people don't know that the photograph's being made. The street work, I smile because I think we all understand relationships of space and people on the street, and space in the United States is very different than space in Asia and those kinds of things. And so, I kind of smile. And then with the silent spaces work, or the work that's on the back wall, which a lot of that work I just shot this past April, it slows me down. It's more contemplative for me. I think it's more about the feeling that I get when I go into those spaces. And I hope that the viewer sees the same thing. Again, if they don't, it doesn't bother me, because I think everybody brings their own set of values and circumstances to the work. And as long as they react to the work, I'm happy with that. If the reaction's good, I smile. If the reaction's bad, I still smile.
And aside from photography, do you dabble in any other forms of artwork, any other forms of media or mediums?
In undergraduate school and graduate school, I spent a lot of time doing ceramics. I love ceramics. It's such the opposite of working in photography, where photography you have to be clean, and in the darkroom it's quiet, where if you're working in ceramics, it's mud, and if you don't like it, you just crush it, it goes away. And I like that. I still do it a little bit, but not as much as I used to, because it's definitely, it's a time issue, and I would rather spend the time working in photography. The other thing that I do is I play a lot of music. And again, not as much as I used to, but it's still something that I enjoy. I have a couple guitars I've been playing for a long time, and I like it.
And how have you seen photography evolve over the past 30 years that you've been taking images, and how do you see it evolving in the next 30 years?
Wow, difficult question. And I'm sure everybody's aware that the biggest change is obviously the move from analog to digital, and the change from sometimes cameras to phones, and sometimes phones to other means of capturing what it is that you're looking at. The interesting thing that I find is that when I travel overseas, and even more and more in the United States, that the pendulum seems to be swinging back towards the analog side of things. And I'm not sure, and I might ask you the same question, if you've never been in the darkroom, and the first time you go in and you're like, whoa, it's magic. And it kind of is, and it kind of is. As far as where it's going to go, I'm not really sure. I've seen some interesting things recently in Europe and Japan where it's almost like 3D technology, where you wear the 3D glasses and the 2D images start to become three-dimensional, and virtual reality and those kinds of things, and I think with gaming and all that kind of stuff, it's all kind of moving through photography. I don't think photography is necessarily just still images anymore. It's moving towards motion, it's moving towards video, it's moving towards 3D objects.
For those of us that might be interested in photography or enjoy taking pictures of things but don't necessarily want to pursue a career in photography, do you have any kind of advice for those people?
Take pictures. I mean, I don't think you have to have a career. I think we make art, whether it's capturing the moment, wanting to be an artist, not wanting to be, for pleasure, and to show people what we see, or to capture memories. And I don't necessarily think that we all have to be artists, but I do think that if it's something that gives you joy, that you should do it. It's like, I may not be the best painter in the world, but if it brings me joy, I should paint. It doesn't mean that I'm going to try to show it in a gallery, but again, I think it's pleasure. And I also think sometimes it gives us enough of diversion that allows us to think about other things as well.
And how do you think that different applications like Instagram, Tiny Beans, and Facebook have affected the way that people see and view or interpret photography in the modern age?
It's changed it a lot. And I can't remember the exact science, but I did read an article recently that we're inundated with images so often now that we spend less than 3 seconds or 5 seconds or whatever the time frame was looking at images, because we see them on the screen, or we see them on TV, or they flash before our eyes as we're driving the car, or the billboards or television or whatever it is. And so we don't really spend time really looking at images anymore. I think it's more of a kind of a cursory glance. And I think that becomes a little problematic, that I would like people to spend more time really looking at things and observing rather than that kind of cursory thing, because I think when people make a statement with the work that they show, visually or musically or whatever, that you want people to spend the time and to at least spend time and look at it.
And this might be a bit of a weird question, but is there any form of photography or other kind of art that maybe you don't fully appreciate as much as you think you should? And do you have anything to say to people that might be very fond of that particular kind of artwork?
I thought long and hard about this. I would say no. And the reason being is I think that you need to be open to anything. And if you don't like it, I think you need to kind of step back and try to understand what it is that you don't like about it. And I teach a photo history class, and I've had students say, well, I really don't like this. And my challenge to them is, please tell me why. Well, I don't like the subject matter, okay. I don't like the materials they used, okay. But if it's about the image and you don't like something about the image, I think you need to kind of take a step back and try to understand what it is about the image that makes you feel that way, and then decide if that point of view is valid or not valid. And then as far as doing something, I'd say, if it's something that you like, yeah, just go ahead and do it. I don't think you have to ask for approval from the audience. If it makes you feel good and it's something that inspires you, I would just say, go for it.
You briefly mentioned your ethics and morals during your gallery talk. And I was kind of interested if you've ever had an instance where your desire to photograph something might have outweighed your personal morals, and how it might compare to photojournalists like Cyrus McCrimmon.
That's a difficult question. I think, I'm not a photojournalist, but as a photojournalist, there are certain things that come with the territory. You're not allowed to intercede. You're not allowed to, those kinds of things. I suppose it's one of the reasons why I'm not a photojournalist. I consider myself to be compassionate and a human being. And if I found myself in a situation where the person I was photographing needed assistance or needed a help, I think my upbringing outweighs the fact that I'm not supposed to do that. I don't think I could not do it. That's probably the best way to say it. And as far as has it ever outweighed, no. I think my morals and my ethics stand above my ability to make photographs. Making photographs in a foreign country is very different, though, and the photographs in Japan are a good example. As a foreigner or a gaijin in Japan, I understand the culture enough to know that there are places that I should go and shouldn't go, pictures that I should make and maybe I shouldn't make. But the interesting thing is that as a foreigner, oftentimes it kind of gives you a blank slate, and nobody ever says anything to you. They kind of look at you with the camera and they're kind of going, why are you making this picture? But they'll never say, no, you're not supposed to. I think in all the instances where I've photographed overseas, only one time have I had somebody go like this, which I'm assuming meant that I wasn't supposed to make the photograph. And I just looked at him and I just went, I'm sorry. And in Japanese, it's gomen, gomenasai, which meant I'm really sorry. I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to. I'm on a public space. I'm making photographs in a public area. I didn't realize that that was kind of taboo, I suppose is the best way to describe it.
And very briefly, to kind of elaborate on your travels and taking pictures overseas, have you ever taken the time to go up to a person and try to kind of start a conversation with them and get to know them before taking their image, or returned to try to find those people that you took pictures of?
So the interesting thing is that a lot of these places in Japan I make work prints. I make these little tiny, I don't know, 5x7 prints. And oftentimes I'll go back to the places where I made them and I'll tape them to the poles. And in hopes that somebody either likes them or the person that frequents that area will see their likeness and they'll pick them up and they'll take them. And the interesting thing is that when I go back, they're almost always gone. And again, I'm not sure if it's the city that says you're not supposed to put things on the pole, or people in the area that maybe know the people in the photographs and then collect the photographs and then hand them over. There have been a couple of occasions where I've gone back to places that I knew were still going to be there when I go back the following year and take copies of the photographs with me and then offer them, because I think if they're willing to spend the time and give me the time to make photographs, I need to be able to give back to them, and I think that's important.
In terms of what you have on display in our gallery right now, which photograph has the most profound meaning to you, and what specific emotions or memories do you associate with that image?
I've been photographing on the street since the 1980s, so there are certain photographs that I'm drawn to very much, and I would say as much about nostalgia as anything else. But the work on the back wall from the Silent Places images, I shot almost all of those this past April. And when I went to Japan this year, I said, I'm going to make photographs of stuff that I like. I'm not going to go in with any preconceived notion. If it struck me, I was going to make the picture. And I shot 40 rolls of film, so about 480 photographs like that. And I was stunned at the number that, when I looked at them on the contact sheets, that I was kind of like, wow, these are really pretty cool. So, I mean, as I look back at the photographs, I would say maybe the one that's on the announcement, which is the third one over, or the one of the stuff that's drying in the racks in the back, are kind of the two that really kind of speak to me more so than anything else. I'm walking down the street and it's noisy and it's crowded, and I turn around, especially with the image on the third one over there, and it's like it got silent. It was so bizarre. And I felt like there should be kids there. It's like a playground, but there's nobody. And I'm in the middle of the city where there should be tons of people. And then the other image, sorry, I picked two. The other image with the racks that are hanging in the back, it's dried fruit. And I walked into it was an open garage, and I kind of walked in with the camera and kind of went like this and took the picture. And the guy kind of came out of the house and kind of looked at me, and he was like, tapped me on the shoulder, and he's like, and I went, and because I don't have enough vocabulary in Japanese to really explain what I was doing, and he was like, frutu, 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 meaning that they were drying fruit. And I said, we don't have a lot of that in Colorado where I come from, so I was very intrigued. And then, as I mentioned earlier when we were talking, he led me by the hand and took me to other places that were really, really incredible. And I think, for me, that's the thing that's the most amazing about those kinds of experiences, is that, sometimes there's places you're not supposed to go to, but you have a rapport with the who's looking over your shoulder, you're making the photograph of, and then they take you someplace else, and then somebody else takes you someplace else, and somebody goes, how did you get there? You're not supposed to be there. And I was like, well, the guy took me here. I don't know what to tell you, but it worked out for me. And it kind of always makes me smile. And what I try to do, like you mentioned before, is to go back to those places with photographs, because I do think it's important, if they're going to be kind to me, that I need to reciprocate and bring images back to show them what I'm doing. And every time I do that, they'll have a big smile on their face, and they'll kind of smack me on the back, and maybe they remember me, maybe they don't, but it's, I'm the tall white guy that's in Japan making photographs of places where most people don't even want to go.